Hi, my name is Liam Durbin, and this presentation is about open source. Before I start on open source, let's take a look at the agenda. First, I will talk about open source and what it is. Then I'll explain licensing in relation to open source. Next, I will explain what can be considered open source, what open source actually means, and the history of how open source came to be. Then, explain how the open source initiative in Linux helped lead the industry forward. I will then go over some examples of open source programs. Next, I'll explain some advantages and disadvantages of using open source. And finally, I will go over the future of open source in our society. Before I start talking about open source, I need to explain how open source can be by explaining source code. Source code is written in a programming language, then compiled and translated into computer language or binary code, which makes a computer able to run the program. Proprietary software companies prevent the modification of this code through licensing and restrictions, while open source companies make the code available to the public as well as the program. Through licensing, a company who makes software is able to choose if they want the public to be allowed to have access to the source code or not. Proprietary software companies use their licenses to keep the code hidden in order to protect intellectual property and also help prevent potential attacks on the system. While open source companies use their licenses to allow anyone to use, view, or edit the code, with the belief that with more people accessing the code and editing, the software will only become better and more secure. The GNU General Public License, commonly known as GPL, is a gold standard of these licenses. Although most of this presentation will refer to open source in a software, anything can be open source, as long as the intellectual property has the correct licensing. According to the Open Source Initiative, to be considered open source, the program must have several qualifications. One of these is that the program must have source code and that the code must be available and easy to access. Another one is that the program must be able to be freely redistributed. The program cannot have regulations on sharing the program with others. Another qualification is the license the program has needs to be the same for everyone. The license cannot change from person to person. History of open source. Richard Stallman launched the GNU project in 1982. His goal was to write a complete operating system free from constraints on its source code. In 1989, the GNU General Public License was first published, which grants users to run, share, and modify the source code of the program covered under. In 1991, Linus Torvalds released a freely modifiable source code, which combined the GNU operating system, made the first complete free software operating system. The term source open source gained traction after Netscape launched Navigator in 1998. It eventually replaced the term free software in the community after disagreements of what the term meant. And in 1998, the Open Source Initiative movement was founded. According to their website, OSI was conceived as a general educational and advocacy organization to execute the same mission agreed on at the Free Software Summit held in April 1998. At the launch meeting, the original board accepted this general mission and decided to focus specifically on explaining and protecting the open source label. Some early activism was done as well, with OSI supporting a petition to encourage the US government to use open source software in January of 1999. Two of the first things they did were craft the open source definition and use that definition to create a list of OSI approved licenses for open sourcing. They are also very big advocates for the continued and growing use of open source. They are not very public with their advocacy, but they work behind the scenes, encouraging companies and politicians to use open source. The Linux Foundation is dedicated to building sustainable ecosystems around open source projects to accelerate technology development and industry adoption. Their operating system is the most used OS in the world. They provide funding and support for many companies that are moving to open source and help by providing infrastructure for the code. Linux's operating system is used by 95% of the world's top 1 million domains, and all of the 500 supercomputers also run on Linux. Now I will give some examples of open source software. DLC Media Player is a free cross-platform multimedia platform that can play anything from DVDs to streams. It can be downloaded and used on any platform and is completely free for anyone to download. It can also be customized for aesthetic looks, and extensions can be installed for better use by the consumer. Another example is Apache HTTP Server. It is a free open source web server whose goal is to maintain a secure and efficient HTTP that provides services needed for consumers. They also provide support and help members of the Apache community. Mozilla is also an example of an open source company. They are an open source web browser whose mission is to ensure the internet is a global public resource, open and accessible to all. An internet that truly puts people first, where individuals can shape their own experience and are empowered, safe, and independent. They believe that through collaboration on an open platform is essential to human growth and expansion. There are many advantages of open source software. One of them is that students and anyone learning about coding can modify code for learning. People can also easily distribute code and software across the internet. It allows software to evolve by the use and changes of many users. Users can customize a program to work better for what they need. Though open source is great, there are disadvantages and potential risks that come with it too. One risk is security. Just how users can view the code and edit it for the better, users with malicious intentions can also find a way to exploit vulnerabilities in it and harm the program. Another disadvantage is the speed of support. If something goes wrong, a lot of open source communities rely on community members to help fix the problem. If no user fixes the problem, it may take a while before the provider fixes it themselves. Another disadvantage is that though the open source software is free, external costs may come with external support or troubleshooting. Even though there are disadvantages, the future of open source is very bright. With more and more corporations partnering with industry leaders and joining the open source initiative, open source will continue to grow in popularity and evolve into the main form of software. Even an industry leader on the proprietary side of things, Microsoft, is making a huge shift to more open source software, recently signing a $7.5 billion deal in research and development in the open source field. The future is open source, so do not be surprised when you see your favorite operating system diminishing or switching to open source software. To conclude this presentation, I'll give a quick recap. First, I explained source code and how that is made into a software program that can be made into a program. Then I went over how through licensing, a software is either proprietary or open source. I then explained what it means to be considered open source and the history behind it. I then explained how industry leaders, open source initiative, and Linux help guide the open source industry and community forward with their work. And then I gave examples of some open source programs. I then listed the advantages and disadvantages of open source, concluding with the future of open source. Thank you for listening and watching my presentation on open source.